Hello, everyone, and welcome to the chat. I'm Maria Christovergus. We have Angelia, Melissa, and Joey joining the panel today. Joey! We got Joey joining the panel today. It's Friday, so it's joyful.
That's right.
Well, we're going to jump right into a really hot topic. It's actually getting some local attention now. Tensions continue to run high regarding the tragedy in Charlottesville, Virginia. Earlier this week, the University of Florida denied the request for a white supremacist to speak on campus. Richard Spencer, who is the head of the National Policy Institute, contacted the university for plans to rent the space and has since been denied. Now, the University of Florida's president released a statement saying in part, quote, "I find the racist rhetoric of Richard Spencer and white nationalism repugnant and counter to everything the university and this nation stands for." Now, the school's president says the school remains dedicated to the First Amendment, but adds that it does not require a public institution to risk imminent violence to students and others. Amen, right? I really applaud the stance that the University of Florida has taken, because this type of speech is just fueling more things to happen across our country, I believe.
It's not surprising they would do that after what happened in Virginia. You can understand why the university president will be terrified of more death, more violence, this, horrible negative publicity around this beautiful college campus here in Florida. So I totally see that argument. But I was thinking about this on the way over here. Let's not forget that those neo-Nazis that marched in Charlottesville, Virginia, did so because they went to court with the assistance of the ACLU, who enabled them to march. And the ACLU defended these repugnant people's right to free speech guaranteed under the First Amendment, because that's what they do. They defend the Constitution. And so it's a very difficult argument. People are guaranteed the right to express their views, even if you find their views hideously offensive. Now, though, we're in a new situation where college campuses have become flashpoints for what could be more deaths. And seeing that come home to Gainesville, I think, is so troubling for so many people.
I mean, I tell people you do have the freedom of speech, but you don't have the freedom of consequences. So whatever you say, you have to kind of reap what you sow, sort of thing. I mean, what I found interesting was this gentleman was just wanting to rent the facility, which is the Phillips Performing Arts Center. So what I found nice is that they could have just denied his request and gone about their business. But I love that the president of the University of Florida took the opportunity to say, for the record, this is where we stand. Because if you remember, I think maybe a month or two ago, Ann Coulter was trying to speak at like UC Berkeley, I think.
Right, and they wouldn't allow her to speak.
Yeah, because they said they booked her, but then they didn't think it was safe, and they couldn't find another venue, and that became a PR nightmare. So I appreciate that the University of Florida has said from the get-go, we're not allowing this. This is not what we stand for. And for what it's worth, I know a few people that work at UF. I have a friend that teaches at UF, and they've all been very supportive of the decision.
They're on board with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that why couldn't you be? You know
but they have to be, because they have to protect the students.
Right.
And that's the
Exactly.
problem, because I mean, you saw
Exactly.
so many parents yesterday on television talking about, I just sent my child to school. Just sending them, imagine, just sending them away to UF, and this is the first thing that comes up. And their course of education, you're sent there to have an education, not to get into a fight, not to be mauled by a car, not to be in a fight the first week that you're there. I mean, this is like so, infuriating, but sad on so many levels. But I wasn't sure where I stood on all of this to begin with, because we have talked about this banter before with Ann Coulter, with Yiannopoulos, with so many different people that have tried to speak at colleges. And so part of me is like, no, just let the guy speak, let him do what he wants. If nobody wants to show up, then they don't show up. But then I realized that hundreds of people do show up to his speeches, some that are opposing, but for the most part, some that are actually wanting to hear his repugnant rhetoric, if you will. But so I went on to see, because he just spoke at Auburn University not too long ago, a month ago, and there were hundreds of people that were there, and I actually listened to his speech. And you listen to all of his speech in whole, and it's really infuriating. Whether you believe what he believes or you completely don't, it is so hard to listen to him, because it is hate-based.
Yes.
And whenever something is hate-based, it's so different than just expressing an opinion.
Exactly.
And you have two different cultures here. You have the fact, you brought up Auburn, and I listened to a portion of that as well. We're in the South. you know, and so you have that culture. And the beauty of public education in so many of our universities across the South even is that we have such diversity. And so I go back to what you said, you have to protect the safety of the students. You just know that that is just a recipe for disaster.
But if you know anything about the University of Florida, the University of Florida is obviously UF, but Gainesville has started to find its way to expand into the campus, if that makes sense. So it would be difficult to keep the students safe, because I know where this Performing Arts Center is. It's off 34th Street. It's kind of off the beaten path. There would be no way to get students there to listen to him and keep them safe, because you can't just shut down and guard an entire city block.
Right. You know, the other thing I keep thinking about is when you talk about the limits of free speech, the old saying used to be, yes, you have free speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Exactly.
Remember that? Well, we've reached the point now in our culture where what these people are trying to do, culturally speaking, is yell fire in a crowded theater. They're wanting to put more gas on this fire. So from that standpoint, I sort of understand why the university took this position.
Right.
To try to tamp this down a little bit, because things have gotten so ugly. And on the same topic, even closer to home, the president of the Jacksonville City Council is getting some pushback after announcing that she wants to remove all Confederate monuments from public display. Council President Anna Lopez Brochet says the monuments should be moved from their places of honor and taken to museums. Jacksonville Mayor Lenny Curry says the issue of monuments is not a priority for him now. He said, and we're quoting, "I encourage their debate on this. If this is what they want to do, if the council president and the body give me legislation on monuments, I'll consider it at that time." Jacksonville, just the latest in a whole list of cities that is now having this discussion. A lot of other cities have already started to take down the monuments. The other night in Baltimore, Maryland, in the dead of night, they removed a Confederate monument because they didn't want to do it in the middle of the day, given the violence that they saw in Virginia. So we're about to have this very divisive discussion right here in Jacksonville. What do you think? Should the monuments stay or should they go?
I don't know how I feel about this, to be honest with you. My first gut instinct is the common, I hate to say, the common talking point that people revert to, which is if you start to take away monuments, you start to forget history, and then you're bound to repeat history. And that I get is somewhat of a good point. But then I thought about it. I feel like there probably is not a Hitler statue in Germany. We have not forgotten the Holocaust. Do you know what I'm saying? That's my opinion.
And that's and if you're African American in this country, that's certainly the point of view.
I mean,
they don't glorify Hitler in Nazi Germany, what was Nazi Germany.
Right.
And we very well know their history.
Exactly.
So just at the same
there
time.
are over 700 Confederate statues throughout our nation, whether it's a park or a courthouse or a state capitol. And I don't know. I mean, we talked about it the other day. What was it? I think Tuesday with Stacy, and she kind of said it's a difference of when a statue's in a park and it's revered. That's where I think it gets very messy.
It's a place of honor. You're venerating and glorifying the individual or the historical figure. So that's why. The other thing too that I was researching this, I discovered most of these monuments didn't go up right after the Civil War. They went up at the turn of the century and then again in the 1920s. They were put up mainly by groups like the Daughters of the Confederacy because they were trying to put forth somewhat of a revisionist history about the South and the Confederacy as a way to push back against calls for civil rights.
Let the record show that descendants of Robert E. Lee, Jefferson, and Stonewall Jackson have all spoken out and said we support the removal of the statues.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that what they are proposing to me gives such balance that they're putting them in museums.
Right.
Because I'm with you. I mean, I agree that you can't erase history, and for us to be a better America, we need to know where we've been to make sure we don't make those same mistakes again. But like you were alluding to earlier, I've had very in-depth conversations with Stacey Ellison, who's on the chat, and those monuments and looking at the Confederate flag bring such pain and anguish that I can't imagine allowing that to be sort of memorialized. I think they have their place, and I think actually what she's proposing is fair.
And I think it's nice to hear both sides of it too, though. Like we had Stacey on the show the other day, and she so elegantly explained the feelings behind it from a Black woman's perspective. And that was something that the reason that we have this show is for us to open up the doors, to have an open conversation of what it really means to be in somebody else's shoes. I had no idea. To sit there and listen to her and to see all of the pain, the anger, the anguish, everything that she goes through, just to look at a statue that honestly means very little to white people. I mean, so you know what I mean?
And
And who
it's
is
like-
white?
it
Can
was
I ask
really-
that question? Who is really
Seriously.
white?
Well, exactly. But I
There's
mean,
that,
the thing is,
too.
it's like, I like how she said to put it in museums, but the fact is, we really need to know what this is about, and we need to have open conversation about these issues. And I think that's the best part that's
and
happening here.
For me too, yeah. For me, that's white privilege in a nutshell. Oh, I never thought about that. Oh, it doesn't affect me. We have that privilege, you know what I mean? For African Americans, the pain is quite real. And so even though what we're going through as a society is so horrible, I think it's starting conversations and opening eyes for many Americans.
Much needed conversation.
That's what we do here at the chat. All right, well, something else that has a lot of people upset today, a softball team from Virginia was disqualified just hours before the final of the Junior League World Series because of a player's Snapchat post. Yep, after winning a game, which was described as a feisty, one player actually did a Snapchat story that included 6 team members showing their middle fingers. Yeah, some of them say that the post made it clear that it was intended for other teams' players. After hearing of the post, though, the coach, he had the girls apologize to the other team. But the head office of the Little League World Series disqualified the entire team from the tournament completely. So I played softball for many years, and we didn't have Snapchat back in the day. But if we did, I have to say this probably would have happened.
You really? At 12 and 15 years old?
There's such animosity. There's so much competitive nature that goes on between softball teams, and especially when you get to that championship level, it's just like competing in anything else at any athletic level. So with that being said, that's really difficult for the child to make this decision to put it on social media, because we didn't have that back in the day.
No,
and you know what?
no, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm like, I have a different viewpoint on this.
Listen.
Oh no, I'm not condoning
You're not
it.
buying that?
I'm not
No.
condoning it whatsoever.
No,
but
no.
I'm saying
I
that
feel
this
sorry for
competitive-
them.
This
This was
competitive nature is so
I feel
I
sorry
get
for
that.
these girls
I get that.
they-
But that's a professional picture. I'm not saying it's a professional picture, but clearly a coach or a mom took that picture. And so for any person in authority, and that would be my kid's coach or another parent, allowed them to flip the middle finger during a picture, I am appalled. And before the Little League whatever says you're not playing in the tournament, I would have ripped my own child out of that tournament
I
and
totally
said
agree.
12,
Totally
13,
agree.
14, and 15 years old.
I'll
That
say this.
is ridiculous.
So you blame the parents.
I blame, yes, I blame. Well, I mean,
obviously the kids need
I'm
to
not.
take the consequences.
There's a lot of people to blame.
Agreed.
A lot of, and
Agreed.
the
But the
kids.
parents allowed that picture.
Well, and like I said, I don't think a teenager took that
How
picture.
do you know? You have no idea. It could have been one of their
Regardless.
And here's
My
my
thing
thing
is,
once they knew about it, it should never have
12 years
even-
old. You weren't
12
feisty.
years old.
You were going, we're going to win no matter what.
But here's the thing,
Come on.
when I was in middle school, that was like, MySpace was kind of the prime. Facebook was like
Oh,
people
yeah,
were whispering
MySpace.
about.
Oh,
People were whispering about.
MySpace.
My 7th grade English teacher told me this, and I will never forget it, and I live by it to this day. She said, "You never put anything on social media that you do not want
See,
on
that's
your
the thing.
church's projection
That's why I
screen."
feel
Yes.
sorry
But here's
for
the thing
this
about-
generation.
No, it has
We
nothing to
didn't
do
have
with
to
social
worry about
media.
that.
To me, it has nothing to do with social
no,
media.
this
They
generation
should not
should
have been.
know. They should know
It
the
doesn't have to do
problems.
But
with
it
of it.
social media.
doesn't.
We had
It
no
has to do
internet.
with
We had no Maria.
appropriate behavior.
Oh my God, and
Oh,
Maria.
absolutely.
At 12,
Maria.
Yes, at 12, they should have the fear
I
of
disagree.
me in them.
When we were that age, you guys don't even
think I
remember.
would have ever
You
done
don't
that. I
remember,
feared my
Joey.
parents.
When we were that age, there was no
That's
social
true.
media. We did things like that all the time. If someone took a picture, maybe a few people saw it. I feel sorry for these kids.
No, you know.
Because everything goes around the
But
world
that's
in
why they
a
did that
day.
Snapchat, because it disappears.
But hold on,
I
there's
know,
more.
but
there-
you can
But somebody took the
screenshot it.
picture.
You can
They
screenshot
wanted this
it.
to disappear, but they wanted it seen.
They're
for a
having
minute.
to be extremely mindful from a much earlier age in a way that my generation
Then
didn't
guess
have to
what?
worry
The
about.
parent is at fault for giving that 12-year-old a Snapchat account.
well,
That comes back on the
yes.
child and the parent. Let me say this, though. There's more to this story, in my opinion. Okay, so the coach found out. The coach said take it down. The coach then made them apologize. The other team said, It happens. And I do get this is more, listen, when I was in high school, this is what you did. You toilet papered the other team's football field. You stole their mascot and put it in the lake.
This is the equivalent of that.
But guess
different.
what? When the mascot went back,
How
there
was
was
that
no record of it. When you have taken that picture,
That's
I would love
inappropriate behavior.
It is inappropriate.
So
I
is
would love to.
TPing, so is, when I was a senior,
No.
we did senior
You're not
pranks. You know what we
vandalizing
did? We
to a
greased
point
up
of no
pigs,
return.
and we
Here's my
let
issue.
them run down the halls
So
of
the
the
team-
school.
this team
That was
apo-
my senior prank.
This team
we greased up
apologized.
pot-bellied pigs, and they went running down the halls of our school. We didn't get in
hilarious.
trouble.
Don't give
we
any
did
ideas.
stupid
Don't
things.
give any ideas.
But see, my issue with this story is this. This team apologized. The other team accepted the apology. And I think within 2 hours of the game is when the Little League
Right before the
Association,
game,
like, what do they call it?
Right.
Right before the game, they said, game's over. So at that point, if the other team has apologized, and these other kids, I agree with you, Maria, that these kids, listen, they know what they're doing on Snapchat, putting their middle finger up, they deserve a punishment. But I think if the other team if they have apologized, the other team said, we get it, whatever, it's okay, you took it down, and then 2 hours before the game, you call the game, like, all right, well, they're out.
Yeah, but see, I think that the commissioner made the right call with this because I think, I mean, being on the other side, I've been there, I've been the 12-year-old that was feisty. I think that the commissioner made the exact call that needed to be made because this was an entire learning curve for a 12-year-old
Yes.
to realize. Because I'm telling you,
And it
when
was a
you're
violation.
about to
I mean,
go into championships and you've lived your whole season waiting for that game and you can't play, they will never post anything on Snapchat again or Facebook or Twitter or any
It's a
other
hard
universe
lesson.
that
Let me
comes
tell
in the
ya.
next 10 years.
Hard lesson.
Mama Maria don't play. Y'all
For real?
kids out
Obviously
there
not.
should be very thankful that I am not your mama. All right, we got to take a break. Sorry if we got a little loud there, but we're just getting started. We'll be right back.